Hey, George and I and Sierra, we're here at Blue Ridge Land and Auction United Country, and I asked George to come in. Well, first of all, George and I, we're on about our 40th year of being fellow musicians.
Mm-hmm.
Done a lot of playing different places, haven't we?
Yeah, we started the High Noon Band back in 1982, about this time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Been an interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, we played pretty well from 82 to 94. We were active. I think you kind of went part-time,
Mm-hmm.
what, about 86, 87, somewhere in there. And then we took about 10, 15 years where we didn't do much, and then here in the last few, we kind of got back into it. So
Yeah.
just enough to keep it interesting.
Wanted George to talk a little bit about the heritage of bluegrass music here in Floyd County. Floyd County is well known for its bluegrass music, and George and his family, they've just want to hear your life in the bluegrass,
Yeah.
the world of bluegrass.
Well, yeah, of course, my full name is Georg Slusher, and I was named after two of my great grandfathers. One was George William Slusher, who was a Floyd native, and then the other one was George H.B. Terry, who lived out in Carroll County at the edge of Floyd and Patrick and Carroll, in the Bellspur area out there. And so anyway, I have musical heritage from both lines, really. And my great-grandfather, George W. Slusher, he lived his whole life in Floyd County. And for about 22 or 3 years, he ran a store on Rush Fork Creek at the foot of Black Ridge. It's the farm I grew up on. And he sold that out to my grandfather, Roger Slusher, in 1914, and moved to Floyd and here in town, and lived in there the rest of his life. And ran a store here, and what I understand is he sold harmonicas, you know, those little Horner harmonicas, and so subsequently he had he had 14 kids, but you know, a couple of his sons got really proficient with harmonica, and my grandfather's older brother Rom Slusher was my dad always said he was probably the best harmonica player he ever heard, and he had the farm right beside my grandfather's, and so anyway, you know, Saturday nights, whatever, they'd get together in the living room or kitchen or whatever and play music. And so my dad, you know, got into it. It wasn't called bluegrass then. This was back in the 1930s. It was just old-time string band music, or hillbilly music, or whatever you want to call it. There were bands like Charlie Poole was popular, and he played kind of a precursor to bluegrass, and he would come up from North Carolina into Franklin County and into Floyd County because the music was good and the liquor was better. And then also there was bands like Skillet Liquors, you know, Jimmy Rogers, you know, like some of the people that played at Bristol were from, you know, this area and so forth. So anyway, that's kind of how that all got started. And then I learned to play with my dad. He was always, just about every week, would go to somebody's house or whatever, and not really playing in public, just you know, living room type stuff. But he was in a band back in the 30s. They called it the Slusher Weddle Band. So that was my dad, he was R.O. Slusher Jr. His uncle Rom, my uncle, great uncle Rom's son Waldo. So that was the Slusher part of it. And then Albert Weddle, who went by Ab Weddle, was the grandfather of Doug.
Yeah, we were talking on the phone about Ab Weddle. Doug Weddle is a real estate agent here at Blue Ridge Land and Auction. And after we were finished talking on the phone, we have Ab Weddle's great-granddaughter. working
Yeah,
here,
yeah, she's at the front desk.
Caitlin, so.
So it's all tied together.
Yeah.
So Ab played fiddle, and then his cousin Alton Weddle played banjo, and they played fiddlers conventions and stuff. There was back in those days there were fiddlers conventions going on all around, not just Galax.
Yeah.
Floyd had one, Czech had one, Willis would have had one, Bent Mountain would have had one, all over there. It was kind of a fundraiser type thing, and then they were kind of the house band at Pine Tavern back in the late 30s. And Pine Tavern would have a Friday night dance. It was similar to what goes on at the country store over here now. And my dad said they would have somebody calling, we used it was Arch Vaughn calling from the floor.
Mm-hmm.
While he was dancing, he was calling the figures. And they got paid a little stipend. And so it was a professional gig, you know. And they did that on up until World War II. And then I think after that, everybody kind of, went their separate ways as far as families and stuff goes. But fast forward to when I was born in 1963, so in early 70s, as all these folks retired, they just kind of got back into playing again. And so I would tag along with my dad, who was in his 50s. Well, the rest of them were older than that. And so it was Ab would be playing fiddle, and then my Uncle Freeman Slusher played guitar, and my Uncle Georg Slusher played the harmonica, and they ended up starting a band called the Corn Cutters.
I remember them.
I remember the Corn Cutters, and Ab's brother Ivan Weddle was the fiddler there. And he was really had a good style of playing for that old time music style. Now, none of that really, if you under the strict definition of bluegrass, which bluegrass doesn't have a definition per se, it's one of those things, well, I know it when I hear it type thing. They were really playing more of an old time music style. And bluegrass, as we know it, kind of, Bill Monroe sort of took the elements of that old time string band music. He also took some elements of the blues, like what Jimmy Rogers was playing. There was a black guitar player that lived in Bill Monroe's hometown or something called Arnold Schultz, and he showed Bill a lot of these old blues stuff like Robert Johnson and that type of thing. So Bill pulled an element of that, and then he also pulled the gospel, that type of thing, the singing and all the close harmonies and all. And that's really where, that was the framework for bluegrass, and then Earl Scruggs's banjo playing with that specific roll style. That's what gave it the jet fuel where it took off. And in this area, of course, there was a lot of, it's always been a hotbed for it. The musicians that I'm familiar with, I think we talked about Gene Questenberry, and Bill Moran. I played a lot with him. He was a Floyd native and a really good banjo player. And Mark Lewis played a lot with him. He played in the bass or whatever. You and I both have played with him on that. Ross Peacemaker. And then like Rick Wimmer, and then some of the older people like Glenn Wilson, Freeman Cochran, Hubert Robertson, Calvin Robertson. They were all involved in the music back in the day. So when I would go out and play music with Dad, we would cross paths a lot, or end up in jam sessions with all those people. So I learned a little. I always had my ears open. Coy Hilton and John Newton Hilton, both great musicians.
Hubert Robertson one time showed me how many instruments he could play. I don't know, was it 4 or 5 or 6?
Is that right?
At one guy's harmonica.
Yeah.
He took off his shoes and socks, laid the bass on the floor.
Is that right?
And his guitar.
That would have been something there.
Singing.
I never was around him a whole lot.
Yeah.
Willard Clower, You know, he had the Southern States store there.
That's right.
Right next to where the country store is. But, so as far as that goes, you know, that's kind of, where I had the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And Dad played just about had every instrument hung. We didn't have a bass, but we had, you know, we had guitar, we had banjo, we had mandolin, we had auto harp, we had harmonicas, and so, you know, when I showed the least bit of interest, so I've got 3 older siblings that didn't really show any interest. So when I showed that I the least bit, I was not only encouraged, you know, I was, you know, led to it basically. So I started playing guitar when I was about 11, and it came up about this, you know, ready for my 12th birthday, and Dad said, "We're gonna get you a guitar." So we went over to Kittinger's over there in Christiansburg, and I bought the Yamaha guitar that I still have it today. I think we paid $180 for it or something. I don't know, 100 something like that. But, and then after that, I never really played any bluegrass per se until Gary Terry probably got me into that.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, I was hanging out some with them, with down at Gene Questenberry's, had the band called Old and New Grass, and I think I've already mentioned some people in that. And then also jam sessions with Bill Moran and Mark and a bunch of Rick Wimmer, a bunch of those guys. So that was really the first bluegrass that I played. And then in 1981, I went to Virginia Tech, and they were just starting a Bluegrass Music Association over there. And so I got kind of involved with some people there, and these are just really good musicians. And that's what got me in listening to more of the, you know, the established artists.
Yeah.
And studying the music a little bit to understand, you know, okay, here's how it's structured, here's how the harmonies go.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we started a high noon band about that same time. And that's kind of where I learned to sing harmonies.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't much of a singer, still not, but you know, you were singing tenor, Joel was singing the lead, Daryl was either singing bass or kind of the baritone part. And when he was singing bass, you know, I had to sing baritone, and I really didn't have an ear for it at all. And I think y'all helped me with that.
Yeah.
And then I had some Hot Rise albums, you know, the bluegrass band Hot Rise.
That's right. Yeah.
They did a lot of.
I thought I turned the volume on.
But Hot Rise did a lot of duet harmonies. So it was you just had the lead and the tenor, and the tenor stayed true to the tenor part. It didn't jump to the, you know, the higher part. So I would play that cassette in the car, and I was singing baritone parts to those songs, belting them out as I drove down the road, and that's how I learned how to hear it and to sing it. So, you know, that helped a lot, because baritone is probably the hardest part to sing or to hear.
I did that when I was trying to learn to harmonize. Like you said, crank the radio up and
sing along to it.
Yeah, make sure nobody's listening or in the car with you.
Well, I remember Daryl. This was when the High Noon Band got started. Daryl called me up because I was at Tech. I was in college, and he said, "Yeah, it's me and Terry and Ronnie Harrell and Brett Kitts and Hope Harrell."
I forgot about her.
And so he invited me to come down to his house there in the. And so it was January of '82. I remember kind of when it was. It was. I think I may have been on. I didn't have a guitar. I didn't have an electric guitar, so I played Brex. And so but you evidently you and Terry, you and Ronnie and Daryl had been singing along to some of those Alabama songs and doing the three-part harmony.
Uh-huh.
And so, you know, we, right out of the bat, we were doing, Feel So Right, Why Lady Why, and y'all's harmony, it just blew me away. But Ronnie dropped out pretty quick, and Breck and Hope had dropped out before that, just because I don't know if they got, I don't know what it was, but could have been me, you know, I don't know. But
I think
they just got cold feet, I
they
think.
got more acquainted all the time, and it just didn't quite work, seemed like, maybe.
And then we looked around, because, you know, it was so it was you and me and Daryl, and we looked around for, you know, for you know, the drummer and this lead singer and all that stuff, and after a while, I thought about Joel Pratt, because, you know, I'd known him my whole life and so forth, and he and I had actually talked at one time about putting something together briefly, and he probably wasn't too serious about it, but I remembered it here. So Daryl and I went to see him during, he was helping Wes Starkey coach baseball.
Yeah.
And we went up there I was on spring break, so this would have been March of '82. And he and I went up there to talk to Joel, see if he wanted to be part of it. And so the next Sunday he came down to Daryl's house, and so it was the four of us, you and me and Daryl and Joel, and I thought about it later. We were auditioning him, but I think he was auditioning us more than more than we auditioned him. And we went through the tunes, and you know, that it was a pretty good fit right there from the start. And we just needed a drummer, and so Daryl and I then we went to talk to Jim Short, and Jim, it was a good drummer, very, very dynamic, more on a rock and roll style than he was, you know, the country we were getting ready to do. But Jim said, "Oh, sure, why not?" And so that's how we got going there. And you know, I recorded our first rehearsal where we all got together.
Oh yeah.
And it's, you know, it's not too bad.
Yeah.
Listening to it now. And that was, it would have been probably April of '82, because you remember the first gig we did? Well, we got together mainly to do the band follies, because Daryl's brother David was the band director. And he had suggested to Daryl he put something together for that, and that's how the whole thing got started. But Joel was already booked to do the FFA banquet, which I think was probably it was a weeknight or something. So that was our first gig. We went into the cafeteria and set up all our stuff. You know, of course we all went down to, was it Riding Hours down in Roanoke, and got the PA, off the PA system and the microphones and stuff. We all chipped in a little bit, and we were stakeholders. So that's how the High Noon Band, you know, kind of got started on all that. And that was not really, we were sort of doing bluegrass material, and the harmonies were similar, but we really weren't doing anything that you could call bluegrass at the time. But we did you know, we had the Ricky Skaggs repertoire, and a little bit of, threw a little bit of Flat Scruggs in there and stuff.
Yeah.
You used to do that, what's that song? I Don't Care.
That's right, yeah.
And we did that, that was Ricky Skaggs' thing. We did that song, maybe a little bit tight tonight. That I got from the Osborne brothers, but so you know, that's how all that got rolling.
Yeah.
And
These online auctions, real estate that we've been having, George has started helping us out with some background, bluegrass music, and, we appreciate that.
Well, yeah, after we established the high noon band kind of thing, and was doing that a while, I started playing more bluegrass later on. And then about 2008, I started playing more of the old time, kind of coming full circle and going back to the roots. And Mac Trainum's a real fixture in the music scene here in Floyd County. He's not a native of Floyd, but he's lived here for, how long do you have to live here? Probably 35, 40 years coming up on, and or been in this Newer Valley area longer than that. And Max he's a real scholar of the music, and has dedicated himself to preserving and promoting the old traditions. And so Max, I'm one of his friends that he calls when he needs a guitar player, and I'm on his Rolodex, I guess. And so over here at the country store, Friday Night Jamboree, we played pretty much there, and I have recordings from maybe 60% of it, and the recordings are pretty good for the most part, and the balance is pretty good, and so that's what I sent, was a couple of songs there that we had done live on stage right here in Floyd.
Yeah.
And then I've got some old tapes of my dad's stuff he was playing with, people he was playing with, and so forth, that I'll send up as the need rises.
Didn't your mother play?
Yeah, she played guitar. So I say her side of the family, there's a music tradition there as well. And she loved it. She didn't have the chops, I guess, that Daddy did, but she played guitar and was a pretty decent singer. And then she had two sisters, and they could, they would sing hymns, and they'd do one would sing alto, the other one would sing tenor, and Mom would sing the soprano part. And they didn't do it anything in public or whatever, but they were pretty good, and mainly hymns and that type of thing.
Yeah. Well, George and I are going to try. He's written words down for me, a couple of bluegrass tunes. We haven't practiced. We ran through it a time or two before we started here, and so
that's the way we roll. Terry and I, neither one of us believe in over-rehearsing. We believe in, which gets us in trouble sometimes. But I don't know, though, one of the best weddings I ever thought we did was the Booth wedding. You sang a couple of songs. I backed you up on one, and Breck backed you up on the other. And I thought those really went off well. And we rehearsed them like an hour and a half before the wedding. So, like I said, it can get you in trouble. We'll try a little bit of, I think this goes back to Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs, a song called Blue Ridge Cabin Home, and this is a standard. If you go to any parking lot picking session at any bluegrass festival or fiddler convention, you'll hear this song. Somebody will do it, and it's just a great song. There's a well-beaten path on this old mountainside where I wandered when I was a lad. I wander alone to the place I call home in those Blue Ridge hills far away. Oh, I love those hills, Lord Virginia. From those Blue Ridge hills I did roam. When I die, won't you bury me on mountain far away near my Blue Ridge there you have it. I can say, ah, bless your hearts and all your vital organs. So that was his thing. I hope I can remember the verses on this. Now we're doing this thing in D, the key of D, which is not really a bluegrass chord. The hardcore bluegrass bands, everything's in A, B flat, and B. In the extreme hardcore, I noticed that Lonesome River Band, you know, Sammy Sheeler and those guys, they were doing stuff in C. And that's some tenor range to get those notes. But Bill Monroe liked key of B because it suited his tenor, and it does. It's not a common key that, you know, a fiddle player or a banjo player is going to play in. And then J.D. Crowe liked, and those guys liked B flat because J.D. Crowe thought his banjo sounded really good in B flat. You know, capoing up 2 frets and playing in B flat. Now, we're going to do this in D. But actually, it is kind of, I think a lot of those Stanley Brothers songs that Carter Stanley wrote, like Fields of Turn Brown and Lonesome River and some White Dove, he did a lot of those in D, so I guess it's okay we do this in the key of D. And again, okay, we'll do a little bit of the Blue Ridge Mountain Blues, which I think this is one that Bill Monroe did. I know Bill Monroe did it. I'm not sure if he had Lester and Earl with him, Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs with him who did it, but it doesn't matter. We're going to try it here. When I was young and in my prime, I left my home in Caroline. Now all I do is sit and pine for the ones I left behind. I've got the Blue Ridge Mountain Blues, gonna stand right here and say, the days I'm counting till I climb that mountain in those Blue Ridge far away. I see a window with a light, I see 2 heads of snowy white, I seem to hear them both recite, where's my wondering boy tonight? I've got the Blue Ridge Mountain Blues, going to see my old train. We'll be hunting possums where the corn tops blossom in this Blue Ridge far away. Right by my paw, I'm going to stay right by my mom. I'll hang around the kitchen door, no work or worries anymore. I've got the Blue Ridge Mountain Blues, gonna stand right here and say, my grips are packed to travel and I'm scratching gravel from the Blue Ridge far away. My grips are packed to travel and I'm scratching gravel through the Blue Ridge far away. That wasn't too bad. We may have had a few prepositions that weren't in the right spot, but anyway. That's an old song. I mean, I don't know exactly what the origin is, if it was written by those guys, Bill Monroe or somebody, but that goes way back. So what we've done is some 60, 70-year-old, 80-year-old material here, at least.
Well, George, we appreciate it, really enjoy it.
Well, I hope it is somewhat comprehensible. I don't know, maybe it can be edited in such a manner that makes some sense.